we are in a good old Jeep. This is Moby. A lot of you know him. Moby had an LS 6.2 for a lot of years, about 100,000 miles. And now he has a LT 10-speed. I want to say it's an LT1, but it's not. It's an L86, which is essentially the same engine. We did put the LT1 intake on it though, because it looks cool, gives us more room. On the earlier JKs 7 to 11, they have a smaller engine compartment. In 2012, Jeep opened up the engine compartment for the Pentastar double overhead cam engine, so they turned the battery sideways, opened that up a little, and they opened the firewall up, which really helps a lot, especially with the L86 and the L83, because they are rather large engines. They're not like the LS's. They have direct injectors inside of the covers, and they're tall, and the intakes are just really tall, especially on the L86, which is larger than the L83. So it's a tight fit in the early JK, but if you measure everything properly, it goes in with little issue. I'll try not to keep this video long because I know we're going to be doing more videos on Moby. You've seen Moby in the background of my videos now for several months, and the fact is Moby's been running for several months, but the schedule in the shop is such that it's difficult to get all these test drives in. While Moby's engine and transmission is cutting edge, the LT with the 10-speed, he has more technology that I said I would talk about in previous videos. Moby has our new single module system. Our new single module system has basically reduced the parts count to a bare minimum. So we no longer piggyback modules. And it's kind of an interesting turn of events that some of our competitors advertised for the longest time that they didn't have piggyback modules, double data link connectors, etc. But they were missing the functionality of these later generation engines. They were running 5-speed transmissions where we're running 10. Now we're actually regressing and we're de-evolving back to a simple single module system. That's right, we only have one engine controller, and that is the GM E92. We're not running the Chrysler PCM, we're not running the Chrysler ECM, we're not running the Chrysler TCM. So we're virtually back to a stock parts count. We're also running the Chrysler pedal, where my competitor has now gone to the GM pedal. I think what's happening here is the evolution of our kit, while very complex at the beginning, has finally been rationalized and simplified to a point that we distilled it down into this single module system. That doesn't mean that the previous iterations of our kit don't work great. They do, and I have them in my personal vehicles. They just had more parts and were more complex, especially the earlier kits prior to the CAN module. I will say the new V3 CAN module is very reliable. It's been out for years. If there's a problem with that system, it's usually an installation problem or some other man-made error. It's a very tried and true setup. The V3 CAN module acted as a bidirectional bridge, just like the single module system does. But the difference is we left the Chrysler PCM in place to report what it had to report. Things like security system, cruise control, anti-lock brake stuff, because the PCM does have a VIN number in it. It's part of the network configuration, so it would report things. Well, our single module system now does all that. And one of the key things we didn't want to do was lose functionality. And I can tell you, not only did we not lose functionality, we've actually gained functionality. Unlike some of the recent competitor builds I've been in, our remote start works properly. Air conditioning is fully computer controlled and works properly. We have full dash function. In fact, if you look at Moby's dash, the reason those lights are on aren't because of our single module system. The reason those lights are on is because there's actually errors in those systems and they're reporting. We do have traction control. Watch this. I'm going to push the ESP. ESP is off, ESP is on. And we're not talking just making the light work. We actually have traction control. I did notice in our competitor vehicle that the light comes on and off, but there is no traction control. In fact, I don't even think there's anti-lock brakes in that vehicle. We have tap shift from 1 through 10, and that's a lot of gears, guys, but it's amazing. In a heavy Jeep like this, just cruising along, feels like I am idling, and I practically am. But wherever you're at in the power band, even with 40s, a little touch of the throttle and you go. On the JKs, the vacuum fluorescent display is programmed to go 1 through 6, so we can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One of the additional features we hope to add in the single module system is a readout inside that vacuum fluorescent display that'll show parameters that the early JKs didn't have, things like transmission temp, current, gear, and other parameters. So we're actually adding functionality. And it's not just about making something work. I noticed with this competitor vehicle we have, the AC idle bump is terrible. On a hot day when the AC pressures can exceed 300 psi, when the compressor engages, the idle drops to the point that the engine almost stalls. We have fully integrated the air conditioning in the GM side for AC idle bump, so you barely know that the compressor is coming on and off. I also noticed that there wasn't proper fan control for air conditioning. Of course, we have proper fan control. It's a fully computer-controlled pulse width modulated Camaro SS fan. So if the AC pressure is 200 psi, it might be running at 50%. If it's 300 psi, it's probably going to be running 50%, 40%. Whatever it is, the fan operates the way it's supposed to. Engine, coolant temp, tranny temp. And by the way, Moby has the new rail cooler. He does not have the rear-mounted fan cooler, but you can see our temps are running really good on the engine and the transmission. So what the single module system was all about was simplifying this install, making it as rock solid as we could, removing all the components and all the wires that we could, and ending up with essentially a swap that would be similar to a Hemi swap, where there were no additional components, except running the GM powertrain. And I believe we have succeeded in doing that. And by doing that, the install time has dropped significantly. I think we're seeing the market move towards this direction. Now the Hemi guys are still Hemi guys, and they're going to still enjoy the simplicity of installing a Hemi. But the GM guys, for a long time, have had to deal with more complexity in the install. I took that on 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, and I'm glad that I did, because I still believe that these GM powertrains are second to none. These new LTs take it to a new level. Well, you can say that the LSs were right in there with a Hemi. They were lighter, they were all aluminum construction, they were powerful, they had better transmissions. These new LTs take the LS even to a new level. Moby drives unbelievably good. The power delivery is probably like nothing you've experienced in a Jeep before. Having 10 gears, direct injection, 11.5 to 1 compression means that even a heavy Jeep like this feels like a sports car. It really is amazing. The single module system has been an evolution of a decade of our electronics. Well, some of the other GM engine conversion companies for the JKs concentrated on making the GM engine work inside of the Chrysler operating system. MoTech pioneered and stayed true to making the GM system work within your Jeep. That means we kept the GM side all GM. GM modules, GM operating systems, GM calibrations, and to attest to that, we have California executive orders certifying these GM powertrains. We're not mixing and matching engine controllers and transmission controllers, putting a Chrysler transmission behind a GM power plant. We're not trying to just make it work, we're trying to make it better. An LT 6.2 with a 10-speed, in my opinion, will outrun most of the last generation of engines. That includes the 6.2 LSs, including the LS3 and the 6.4 Hemis. It's an extremely mild engine, idling at 400 to 500 RPM. In fact, I have to turn the idle up on some of these LT engines because of the power steering systems. Guys are complaining that the steering gets a little bit stiff at really low RPM. The Jeeps run at 600-700 RPM. The Hemis run at 500-600 RPM. But these LTs can run at 400 to 500 RPM. In most cases, it's not a problem. We can go to an overdrive pulley, but it just shows you the versatility of the engine when it can outrun the high-performance 6.4 SRT Hemis and the LS3 GM engines, but still idle at 450 RPM. We're going to go further in depth with the single module system. We've got several vehicles equipped with it now. We've been doing a lot of testing. So this is the first outing with Moby and the single module system. Now, like I said, we do have some other vehicles with a single module system that have been out there. Moby is the first early model manual transmission JK. That's right. Moby was a 2007 and he was a manual transmission. And if you look down here, of course, we've lit up the Prindle like we do in all of our builds, and you can see that the Prindle is fully functional even on this manual transmission build. So is the brake interlock, so is the key interlock. And while we're looking at this dash, check out Moby's tachometer. Notice it's reading low. Well, this was messed with in the past and the needle is just off. We'll go ahead and set that back to stock. What I suggest you do when that happens is do a reset on the instrument panel or the cab module, and that'll home the needle, and then you can set it to 0 when the engine is off and you're going to be fine. We'll set that. Here's another area I see the competitors struggling with, and that is the one-touch start. Moby was originally a manual transmission, and with a manual transmission you have to turn and hold the key until it starts, but the computer will cut off the starter once it knows the engine is running. With an automatic, you just hit the key once, let off, and it will crank until the vehicle starts. Now, we have exactly programmed that into our single module system. Not having the Jeep PCM and the cam crank sync means it was a little bit difficult for our competition to figure that out, and I'm sure they're getting there, but I did notice some starter grind in some of their builds. So let's start Moby here. I'm just going to turn and hold the key, and you'll see how fast our system operates. Now, you will notice that the engine cranked a little bit longer than you would expect, and the reason is, and right now the ABS system and the airbag system or occupant restraint module is going through its checks, and that's why you're going to see these lights coming on. And the reason the lights are coming on again is not because of our single module system, but it does show how functional the system is, allowing all the monitoring and safety on the Jeep side to operate as usual. So the engine cranked a little bit longer than you're used to because we have a low pressure pump supplying a high pressure pump that's mechanical inside the engine. It's being driven mechanically. So that low pressure fuel has to be sensed by the high pressure pump. The high pressure pump then spins up and produces 1,000, 2,000 pounds of PSI pressure, and then the engine sees that, or the module sees that, and allows the engine to start. That's pretty typical of diesels, and now it's typical of these LTs. This is really cutting edge technology for gas engines. By the way, Jeep does a lot of testing out here. It's hot, we got a lot of grades, a lot of collegiate, which is rocky trails. It's pretty tough. So on any given day, I'll see these undercover Jeeps with Michigan license plates driving around, and ironically, this is one of the areas I choose to do my testing. What vehicles is the single module system going to support? It's going to support 2007 to 2018 JKs. It's going to support most of the Gen 4 engines and most of the Gen 5 engines. It's going to support 6-speed transmissions, 8-speed transmissions, and 10-speed transmissions. All GM. So let's run a trail here with Moby. We got a lot of stuff going on, so stay tuned.